burning again,
where the riots are rocking France after the police killing of a 17-year-old.
Protesters are torching vehicles.
Hundreds of cars set up.
France is burning, but where did the spark come from? Last week's shooting was certainly the trigger, but the embers were already smoking by then. Why? Because of immigration, and try to understand this beyond the left-right binary. France's demography has changed a lot in the last decades. Today there are 7 million immigrants in this country. That's around 10% of the population, so take 10 people, and one of them will be an immigrant. Now the concept itself is old in France. People began steadily migrating there by the 1830s. In the 20th century, it was considered the most open country in Europe. Open arms, open borders. Many of these migrants came from French colonies like Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. During the World Wars, France needed more manpower, so in came the migrants. But this was a colonial relationship. France was the all-conquering civilizing power. The Arab and African migrants were just labor. It wasn't a relationship of equals, and this attitude is at the root of today's problems, because France has never apologized for its colonial past. It hasn't accepted war crimes in North Africa, nor has it agreed to pay reparations, so in their mind there is no problem. They say France is the land of equality, liberty, and fraternity, the temple of civil rights. Surely such a country doesn't have discrimination. Most French leaders believe this. I'll give an example. In France, it's illegal to conduct census or surveys based on race and religion. Why? Because apparently the society is colorblind. But you see, to solve a problem, you must first acknowledge it, and France isn't doing that. By 1975, around 6% of their population was of foreign origin. They were immigrants, and that share did not change for 25 years. But in the 21st century, there was rapid growth. As I mentioned, the share is now 10%. So there was zero change from 1975 to 2000, and then a 4-point rise in the next 23 years. Where did these people come from? Around 13 of them are of Algerian descent, 12 are from Morocco, 4.4% from Tunisia, and 3.8% from Turkey. So these are all non-white people, most of them Arabic, African, and Muslim. And don't think these people barged in without invites. France needed these migrants. A 2022 report claimed around 400,000 jobs awakened in the country, because there is no one to work. Why do you think Macron increased the retirement age? Because there is a labor shortage. That was one of the reasons. So France needed the foreign labor, which is why millions of people migrated in the last 2 decades. Plus you have illegal migration. Not everyone takes the legal route into France. Many sneak in and live as undocumented migrants. There were around 200,000 of them in 2014. Now there are more than 400,000. Most of them live in close-knit communities, doing odd jobs. This year France passed a new immigration law, centrist, just like President Macron. It makes legalization of undocumented migrants easier. At the same time, it bolsters deportations at the border. So that's how so many migrants landed up in France. The next step was assimilation, to integrate these migrants into the French society and nation. And that is where they failed. You see, there are 2 kinds of societies in the world. One where diversity is accepted and promoted, countries like the United States and India. You can lead your life based on your culture. Then there are places where one size fits all, like France. It doesn't matter if you're an African Muslim or an Arab immigrant. You must change your culture to live in France. You must become a so-called Frenchman. Obviously not everyone is interested, and this has led to continued alienation of immigrants. It has created a divide. Other European countries have fared better, relatively better. Germany, for instance, has around 24% immigrant population, yet their integration has gone relatively well. So that's one part of the problem. The immigrants are not integrated in the society. The other part is the growing fear among the white French population. Many of them are living in insecurity. What if they become a minority in their own country? What if France becomes a Muslim country? These Fears are widespread and they reflect in the rise of France's far-right parties. These people are fiercely anti-immigration, and their fears often combined with racism, sometimes very publicly. Let me show you a headline. In 2022, top doctors, French doctors, had a brainwave. Why not test the Wuhan virus vaccine in Africa? As if the continent is their testing lab. It tells you how ingrained racism is. And this attitude reflects in French policing. Black and Arab people are 20 times more likely to be stopped by cops, 20 times more than white people. In the last 3 years, there have been 21 fatal police shootings. Most of the victims were black or Arab. What does that tell you? Systemic racism exists in France, but it is unacknowledged and hence festering. The immigrant population often lives in ghettos. Their unemployment rate is 12 compared to the national average of 7%. Remember, this is an estimate. You can't know the real numbers, because race-based surveys are illegal in this country. But you know what? France cannot keep hiding behind its revolutionary values. Those were created for a white Christian country. It doesn't reflect modern-day France. And don't forget, those ideas of equality and liberty only apply to the white Frenchmen in the colonies. None of those applied. And that attitude persists to this day. Let me also tell you something you may not know. Some countries in West Africa still pay a special tax to France. They call it the colonial tax. These countries use CFA franc as their currency, so they're required to store 50 of their reserves with a French central bank. The CFA franc is pegged to the euro. On paper this may seem harmless and mutual, but look at the optics. Former colonies are paying their colonizer. All of these factors have created major fault lines in France. There is fear, alienation, and desperation. It's the perfect cocktail for disaster. So now is a crucial moment in French history. The leaders should accept that France has changed. They brought in people for cheap labor, among other things. Now they must make room for them. If not, the cycle of violence could continue.